Hello, welcome to this webinar. I'm Benjamin Fabre, I'm Datadom co-founder and CTO, and I'm based in New York. Today, we are going to talk about online fraud and bot management. But first, let me introduce you, Sandy. I'm very pleased to be hosting this webinar with you. You are principal analyst at Forrester, and you advise security and risk professionals on application security. Is that correct?
It is, and thank you very much for the introduction, and thanks for having me, Benjamin. I'm really looking forward to this discussion. As you know, bot management is one of the areas I cover in my broader application security coverage, and this is a fun topic.
Yeah, it is. So, speaking of which, what is to be expected during this webinar? First, we will share with you why full protection of mobile app websites and APIs is now a must-have. We will then talk about the impacts of online fraud and bot protection on businesses and their customer. We will share trends in specific threats, including credential stuffing, web scraping, influence fraud, checkout abuse, and inventory hoarding. And finally, we will provide you hands-on recommendations for protecting your mobile apps, websites, and API from online frauds and bot attacks. Let me just give you one information. So we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So feel free to share and to raise any questions during the webinar, and we will take all them at the end and spend time together to answer all your questions. So please engage in this conversation. Before starting, let me share with you just one number, 40%. 40% of the global bot traffic hits mobile applications. So that means today mobile is definitely the new battlefield, which means that protecting a business against online fraud is no longer about protecting their websites. Businesses must take a comprehensive approach to protecting their applications. Why? First of all, because bots and attackers will look for and will target the weakest link in your infrastructure. So let's have a look at a standard and modern infrastructure that we are seeing on a daily basis with our customers. We have the server side, the web servers, APIs that can be powered by bare metal servers or Lambda functions or serverless application. This will be consumed by the mobile applications, by the web applications, and the HTML websites, the client side. Of course, our customers start to protect the web servers and the APIs because they tend to be targeted at the beginning. And they will start to deploy a protection on the server side. But as soon as this is done, bots and attackers will target the client side, mobile app, web app, HTML. And this is the reason why they start to protect also the client side, because bots will target the weakest link inside your stack. But that's not all. 1 or 2 years ago, bots were competing with human beings, trying to be faster and more efficient. But that's no longer the case. Sandy, can you tell us more about this issue?
Yeah, absolutely, Benjamin. And it's a really great point, and it speaks to the democratization of bots. Bots used to be something that you would sort of associate with your sophisticated cyber attacker, right? Somebody who had the savvy and the skills and the tools to build a bot and launch that. But what we're seeing is that as bots as a service have become more popular, as bots have become more prevalent, more people have access to bots. And sometimes their intentions aren't good, and sometimes their intentions are kind of okay. And they're leveraging bots because they can no longer do what they need to do as humans. Let me give you an example here. Let's go back for a second before I get into this. Um, so last year, when the PS5 launched, a lot of humans were having a lot of difficulty getting a hold of it because of bots buying up all of the inventory. And I'll talk more about that later. But a few months ago, I read a newspaper article in a pretty popular, reputable paper in the technology section that talked about how to use bots to snag a PS5. And Benjamin, my head exploded because we're creating absolutely the wrong incentives here. But humans are getting frustrated that bots are going out, coming out from behind them and snagging the inventory they want. And they're adopting this if you can't beat them, join them approach. And now you're actually creating this vicious cycle where humans who are frustrated with bots are now sometimes buying into these bots as a service in order to get what they need because they aren't able to get it regularly. So that means that you've got more bot services out there, they're becoming more popular, and in order to serve their customers, they're going to start clashing with each other because if they can't beat the other bots, then humans aren't going to want to work with them. So we're creating all of these really terrible incentives to make bots
Yeah.
more powerful and stronger. And I wish we'd stop, but frankly, the way we stop is we block the bots.
Yeah.
So let's talk though, about the range of sophistication in bots, because I think, when people think about bots, traditionally they think about this area somewhere in the middle. These, tool-based bots built with Selenium, built with some standard tooling that you have to be reasonably savvy in order to build. You need some technical know-how, and they're slightly more complex than other tools that are out there. But the fact is, there's a real range. As a less savvy user, you can potentially find yourself a pre-built bot and download it from a repo such as GitHub or a forum and try to launch that bot yourself without a lot of knowledge. You can also, as I just talked about, buy into a bot as a service where you're really just paying money for the bot to run and you're getting some of the outputs of that. That's at the low end. That's pretty easy for anyone to access. And then at the higher end, you're going to have bots as a service that don't just require you to spend money, but actually require you to help run them. And that's a little bit more sophisticated. And at the very high end of complexity and sophistication, and here's where we get to some challenges with bot management, you have very sophisticated bots that are built by knowledgeable attackers, those that even are aware of data science, and they're trying to get around the protections. In the same way that defenses are leveraging machine learning and AI these days, some of the most sophisticated bots are using those same tools, using machine learning to try to get around the defenses. So you really have to think of this as a range. In the same way that years ago you might talk about script kiddies as attackers, not particularly savvy, but using tools, and you might talk about, cyber criminals and APTs. We have that same range here. You have bots, basic bots as a service, and you have these more sophisticated bots that are learning and adapting and trying to get around defenses.
Yeah, exactly. So far, we've seen that bot will find and target the weakest link in your infrastructure if that exists, and that highly sophisticated bots, which you will be right to assume that can perfectly mimic a human visitor, has become a commodity, as you just said. So what does it take to detect online fraud and bots in 2021? So first, starting with the obvious, there are a lot of DevOps, DevSecOps in the audience today. So the choice you make in terms of CDNs, load balancer, web servers cannot impact the level of security you get against online fraud and bot attacks. So today we are seeing many of our customers that are multi-cloud, multi-CDN. They are using some Lambda functions, some edge capacity at the edge, and they have to embed a layer of security in any of those components before going live. The second part is the client side. No protection without JavaScript signals. So we are seeing a huge rise in the number of single page app or web app to leverage the new functionalities of the web browsers. And that create a new challenge in terms of detection. So any modern web application must be deployed using a JavaScript embed to run the security. And that's the same on the mobile part. So today we are seeing that the rise in terms of attacks trying to reach the mobile application is going through the roof. So you have to embed inside your mobile applications some SDK to provide the same level of security that you can have on the website. And what is very important is to make sure that this is stable. This SDK won't be intrusive, and finally, that it will be easy to deploy. Today, to give you an idea, Datadom SDK is deployed in more than 500 million of different devices around the world. So we have worked a lot with all our enterprise customers to make sure that this is compatible with all SDK framework to develop mobile applications. And finally, you have to leverage all those signals in real time by using a combination of different machine learning approach. At Datadom, we are using supervised machine learning in order to detect all known threats that are trained on a daily basis with data sets. We are using a large range of unsupervised machine learning like outlier detections, traffic clustering to detect any new unknown threats in real time. And finally, we are using semi-supervised machine learning for some specific use case, for instance, fighting against the captcha farm. So that's the moment when the bots and the human are working together to generate threats on websites. We are stacking all those machine learning algorithm, and then we are able to take a final decision if the request is coming from a human or from a bot. And when this is a bot, is that web scraping, layer 7 DDoS, credential stuffing, etc. And this must be done not just IP centric, but this must be done per request on every single request on the mobile traffic, on the web traffic. Because today, at the same time, a human and a bot can use the same IP address. So let's dig into the main threats and type of fraud that digital commerce businesses are facing. Sandy, can you start by giving us an overview of these threats?
Yeah, and I think the really important point to make here, Benjamin, is that there is such a range of ways that bots can take advantage of your business, and not all of them are strictly about security. If you look at the types of threats we're laying out here, whether we're talking about price scraping, whether we're talking about counterfeiting, whether we're talking about carding, credential stuffing, many of these don't have much to do with flaws in the application itself. They're more about taking advantage of legitimate business logic that you want to have working on your website. You want people to be able to log in. You want people to be able to buy stuff. What you don't want is for them to be flooded. And you don't want there to be therefore used for malicious outcomes. So the challenge with bots is that there are so many ways that they will attempt to take advantage of both legitimate business logic and security flaws. Let's move for a second and talk about the security flaw element of this. Web recon bots are something that we don't talk about as much, but they do have a role in the bot world. And the role that they play is in really flooding a site to find vulnerabilities in the application that they can exploit later. Now, why is that a successful and a viable approach? It's because applications are still the most common way in for many external attacks. Over the past several years, every year, Forrester has asked organizations who have suffered breaches due to external attacks, how did the attacker get in? And you can see from this year's data that applications were the most common way in, whether that was through software vulnerabilities in open source components or vulnerabilities introduced by custom code in web applications, allowing SQL injection and the like, or even just through other issues in the software or other parts of the supply chain that let attackers come in through the door. What a web recon bot is going to do is they are going to really scan the site for any sort of known vulnerabilities, whether they are popular vulnerabilities in open source components or the like, take that information and then use that to mount a more sophisticated attack later.
Yeah, and we will show right now an example on one of our customers' dashboard. Of course, all sensitive information have been blurred. So this is Datadom real-time dashboard. We can see on the dashboard that the vulnerability scanning, so the web recon, have generated more than 7 million requests during 1 month. So this is significantly lower than the scraping in terms of volume. But here we won't be focused on the volume itself, but more on the threats that just one request can generate on the website. So here is the volume of threats that this website is facing with all vulnerability scanning. What we can see here is that this bot is trying to reach any vulnerable open source component on the website to try to gain access to sensitive data or to very dangerous informations. So let's move on the second threat today. So the web scraping.
Yeah, web scraping is really kind of what it sounds like. It's using bots to scrape quickly a massive amount of data from a site, from an application. And the range of data that could be scraped is all over the place. What we see here are two examples of publicly accessible user data and account data that is scraped from common social media sites. LinkedIn had some pretty significant scraping of their users' public information earlier this year. Now, on the one hand, you might say, well, it's publicly available, accessible. What's the big deal if it was scraped? But when it's scraped in bulk like that and then sold off, it really makes it much more efficient for attackers to use that data later on to commit other acts of fraud because they've scraped so much information about such a mass set of users. And then they can quickly dig into that and target attacks such as spear phishing and other types of fraud. We don't want to make it easier for them to do that. That's why we really want to cut off that type of web scraping. But that's just one type of scraping. Another popular one, which Benjamin, I know you run into a lot for your clients, is price scraping, which is often a competitive element where a less scrupulous competitor will scrape prices for their competitor's site and then offer to sell their versions of the product for just a little bit less and set themselves up competitively, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we are seeing on a daily basis. And you're right that the border between a data leak and intensive scraping is thin. And this is understandable as scraping can look very scary. Let's take an example of price scraping on one of our customer websites. We can see here that during 1 month, this mobile application and website have faced more than 1.3 billion requests. So this is a critical level. And this is not only reaching the web browser traffic, but also the mobile apps and the different APIs. If now we are having a look at one specific attack by using this insight, we can see that this attack was trying to reach all the product, the categories of this website, probably to run in real time price monitoring. Maybe it's the competition that is trying to adjust in real time their pricing strategy, as you said. And what we can see here is that this attack was not so distributed. It was only coming from 13 different countries, and it was only distributed across 86 different IP addresses. So that was a kind of a basic scraper in terms of complexity. But this is not the case of our third threat that we will see right after.
Credential stuffing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a big one.
It is, and I will tell you, it is the one that I hear most about from security professionals I speak to. Things like web scraping I might hear from marketing or e-commerce pros a little bit more, but credential stuffing is still very much a security problem. And let's explain for a second for anyone who's not aware what it is. It's pretty straightforward. You know, we've all had that experience where we get that email from some website that we are signed up for saying that they've had a breach and your account information has been compromised and you have to reset your password and go through all that rigmarole. Well, the breach doesn't end there. What attackers do with that information, with those credentials afterwards, is they resell them to other attackers. And then those attackers try those same credentials on other sites. And sometimes that's successful because, frankly, a lot of us, even though we know it's not good practice, a lot of us still reuse our passwords. We use multiple, the same password on multiple sites. So let's say an attacker purchases on the dark web 100,000 or 1,000,000 previously compromised credentials from a set of attacks. And then they go to some other website that wasn't breached yet, and they quickly, using bots, try out all of those credentials on that site. You don't need 100% success rate here. You don't need a 50% success rate, right, Benjamin? 1 or 2% is going to get you access to a pretty good number of accounts that you have now taken over and you are able to do business as that person, maybe take advantage of any remaining gift card balances, any saved credit card information, and be able to commit fraud and gain some monetary value by doing this. That's what credential stuffing's about.
Yeah, and we are clearly observing this trend. So in the following dashboard, you will see the extent of credential stuffing activity for a single customer over a 1 week time frame. So we can see here that it's almost 100 million requests that are trying to breach these websites. This is a critical level comparing to the different websites in the same activity, and because the number have been doubled during the last 7 days. If we are having a look at the threats and the different attacks that this digital business have faced, we can see that it's not only trying to reach the website login, but also the login on the mobile application, and that the bot is constantly switching from one to the other. And we can see on this particular attack, for instance, that it was massively distributed over 15,000 different IP addresses. And there we're trying to reach the token endpoint to breach the website by using a large combination of user agents. And what we can see is that credential stuffing is also the first step sometimes of our next threat, that is checkout abuse and inventory hoarding.
Yeah, and it's weird to say that this is one of my favorite bot attacks because, like, how can I have a favorite attack? But inventory hoarding, I enjoy talking about because it resonates with everyone. It resonates with consumers who are trying to get their hands on something online and don't even realize that bots are the reason that they're not able to get what they want. I mentioned the PS5 earlier, and let's go back for a second. My colleague, Jeff Pollard, who's a big gamer, spent a ton of time last fall trying to get his hands on one. And so many times he would see that there was availability at some retail site, and he'd quickly try to go to the retail site and put it in his shopping cart. And by the time he did, bots had already taken hold.
Yeah.
And he wasn't able to get it over and over again, and he had this problem. And I heard from other friends and other colleagues who had the same issue and didn't realize until they'd spoken to me or read some of my research that it was bots that were stymieing them. Basically, what's happening here is that bots are getting in, taking advantage of sort of knowing the navigation of the application, taking advantage of the automation, and when a highly desirable piece of inventory, whether that's a gaming console or more recently graphics card or limited edition pair of sneakers, when those become available, quickly swooping in and buying them before the humans can do so. And that's not the end of the story, because then they take those and they resell them on various resale sites for a nice tidy profit, and they've made some money off of it. Remember, this is all coming back to dollars and cents for the attackers. It's how they're funding their life of crime, right? So what we're seeing is these inventory hoarding bots are not just able to take the inventory, but they're really frustrating human buyers who now can't do business with these sites, can't get what they want. They're getting frustrated. From the standpoint of the retailer, they might at first think, well, I'm selling all of my inventory, fantastic. But they're not. They're selling the desirable bits. They're selling the gaming consoles, but maybe they're not selling extra gaming controllers, and they're not selling games, and they're not selling other peripherals, because the bots are only buying the most desirable piece of that, the consoles. So there's definitely a loss in here for the retailers as well. And this has become a huge problem. If we go to the next slide, this blew my mind. I ran a Google Trends report earlier this year on just the word bots, and you can see searching for bots
This is
spiked
crazy.
tremendously
Yeah.
1 week before the PS5 was released. So what we see here, it isn't just that cyber criminals are launching bots. We saw, and as we were talking about earlier with respect to incentives, we saw a lot of humans going online trying to figure out, crap, how am I going to get my hands on a bot in order to get my hands on a PS5? How am I going to get this? How am I going to make this happen? Because they've already realized that they can't compete. So we saw this huge uptick. I really hope I don't see this again. Now, here's the thing, though. As I say that, fact is, I think I am going to see this again because we're having so many issues with the supply chain this year. We were talking earlier about the issues with graphics cards. We know that there's a tremendous chip shortage and that that's having an impact. We're seeing other breakages in the supply chain, even in terms of, cargo ships that are stuck at port because there aren't enough truck drivers to get products across the country to different retailers and to shelves. So there are all of these breakages in the supply chain which are creating shortages. And it's gotten bad enough that even Toys for Tots, which is collecting toys for needy kids during the holidays, they're kind of scared. They're freaking out and they're worried that there's going to be a shortage. So, what do we have when we see potential shortages and these types of issues cropping up? We see prime opportunity for bots to come in and swoop in and make a profit because they're going to attempt to buy up these inventories and these desirable toys and desirable pieces of merchandise that everyone's trying to get their hands on that there aren't enough of, and they're going to try to resell them. So while I said earlier that I hope we wouldn't see these spikes in bots again, what we have right now going into the holiday season is just perfect storm for bots. I do want to talk about another type of bot in here. And this is also a type of hoarding bot, but it's very different because they're not hoarding inventory, right? They're hoarding vaccine appointments. And this is something that first came to the fore, in the last year as everyone was trying to get their COVID vaccination. I live in Massachusetts in the US, and one of the bots that I followed on Twitter was called Vaccine Time. And basically what they were doing is they were scraping the appointments from local drugstores and vaccination sites, my local Walgreens, places like that, and letting me know on Twitter who still had appointments available. That's all they were doing. They were just providing information and providing convenience for customers to know who they could go to potentially get a vaccination appointment, generally trying to be helpful. The problem we have here is that the line between helpful and weaponized is pretty thin. And we unfortunately saw this become weaponized in India, where bots, instead of just providing information about available bookings, took over bookings and started to charge patients and citizens who wanted their vaccination for the right or the availability of a vaccine slot. So that's where this starts to go wrong. Yes, they can be helpful, but they can turn bad pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, we have observed that as well with our customers in the medical appointment booking industry. And one of the other issues that it can generate is that the volume of bots was so high that websites start to be unavailable because that's turned into DDoS attack because they were coming from all around the world and generate outage on the website. So this is an impact on the health in general. And what's amazing is that it's safe to say that this practice emerged from the sneakers industry. That's right, that sneaker retailers were amongst the first businesses very early on to be targeting by scalping bots. And I can show you an example on one of our customers. We will focus on a given day here, October 4th, for instance. So this dashboard belongs to an e-commerce platform that offers limited edition of their products. Let's have a look at the bot journey on the add to cart endpoint. We can see here that 65 million requests that were made by bots on this website. And if we are going deeper into the bot journey using the explore section, we can have a look at the different URLs that were targeted by the bots. So we are using the Datalum DSL to have a look at URL, wildcard, and we will look for the cart word to check all the requests that are done on this specific URL. We can see that the volume of bots on the top IP is just insane. And then if we are going on the URL dimension, we can see that bots are of course going after the add to cart endpoint, but they are also moving forward in the payment funnel, trying to reach the payment endpoint. And here it's very interesting to see that that's definitely the bot journey, going to the add to cart endpoint and then trying to make automated payment, doing payment fraud. It's insane that here 95% of the attempt to run PayPal payment was done by bad bot during this limited edition hype sales. And this is done not only on the website, but also on the mobile traffic. We can see that, of course, website has been reached here by the hackers, but also the mobile traffic that is a significant part of this attack during these hype sales. So now let's talk about influence fraud.
Yeah, influence fraud is, I think, what a lot of people outside of the industry think about when they think about bots, right? Because bots, the terminology came up quite a bit during, say, the last few presidential elections in the US. The notion of bots from other countries joining social media, networks in large quantities and spreading misinformation or trying to appear as though a particular position or situation was more popular than it was. And so what influence fraud really entails is just that, taking bots en masse into different areas, whether it's through reviews or through a social network, and spreading information and popularizing positions that would otherwise seem very niche and a little bit out there. So for example, in the past couple of years, we've seen a lot of bots spreading misinformation on COVID-19 and creating anxiety around that. But the fact is, as popular as some of those misinformation campaigns seem to be, a lot of them were bots. And it's not only in those areas that we see it, we also see it in areas of, say, product reviews and movie reviews and music reviews and popularity of different types of entertainment. Those can be overweighted by bots. So the question sort of becomes, is what I'm seeing real? Is the popularity of this particular view or this particular piece of media or entertainment, is that real? Or is that overweighted by bots? So really, influence fraud through bots can really change how you perceive the world. And that's a real challenge. Twitter has started to take a look at this recently. They've added some guides to help you know if you're talking to a good bot. And that gets you a part of the way there. But as we've said, bad bots are just jumping into this. And what we're really going to need is that alerting that bad bots are taking over, right?
Yeah, so chatbot is definitely a part of the issue here when they start to be invisible and try to impersonate real users. So there are like dozens of threats related to the bot traffic. We have highlighted a few of them. So now let's move on the hands-on recommendations. So I'm going to share with you the three main priorities that our customers highlight when they decide to activate online fraud and bot protection. The first rule is to make sure that your online fraud and bot protection is consistent across the board. Mobile application, websites, APIs, web apps, etc. You want to make sure that all your application is secured because again, bots will try to find the weakest spot in your stack. The second rule is when you are sure that you have protected everything, you have also to make sure that the user experience is safeguarded at all costs. So this is a quote from one of our customers. If for one reason or another there is a false positive in our legitimate traffic, it can't have a blocking effect. We need to protect the customer experience. Datadom had a set of answers for all these type of issues, which made it fairly easy for us to approve the solution. So first, you want to protect all endpoints, mobile app, website, and secondly, it shouldn't have an impact on the user experience because at the end, that's your business that might be impacted. And what our customers are looking for is to have real-time visibility on this false positive rate. They want to make sure that on the website, on the web app, and on the mobile app, the false positive rate is super low. So at Datadom, we have 0.01% at maximum false positive rate across all the different endpoints and devices. because it's not only a matter of security or a matter of tech, but it's also different personas that are involved in the bot protection and the fraud protection.
Exactly, Benjamin. And it's one of the things that's really interesting about this aspect of my coverage is that it isn't just a security problem, as we've talked about. Yes, security is going to be concerned about issues like account takeover, about denial of service, but the marketing team, if their ad campaigns are subject to bot fraud and all they realize that a lot of the lead generation is useless, that's a problem for them. The fraud team, as they see account takeover, as they see card fraud, as they see inventory hoarding, they're going to have concerns about some of the losses from those types of activities. The e-commerce team is obviously going to be concerned about inventory hoarding and shopping cart fraud and about their customers that are starting to complain. Hey, those sneakers I wanted that I've been waiting for 3 months and they're on sale and I couldn't get them. And all of that speaks to the customer experience because now you're getting customer calls. Well, if you're lucky, you're getting customer calls and they're not just going elsewhere. But you're getting customer calls saying, why can't I access your site? Why can't I get your product? Why was my account taken over and stolen? Why was my card balance drained? Fix this for me. And they're angry and they're frustrated. So all of these different personas and stakeholders have to come together and look at the root cause of the problem, which are bot attacks, and collaborate on the solution. And that really speaks to that need for cross-functional collaboration. This isn't just a tech problem. Yes, all of those groups need to work together to help make the decision in terms of technology buying and implementation. You want all of their inputs, you want to understand their use cases, but then you also need to continue talking to each other. Let's say the e-commerce team knows that there is going to be a big product launch next week, something that people have been really excited about, and there's going to be a lot happening. It's going to be high traffic, and the bots are probably going to come out to play. This is the time then, go talk to security, go talk to operations and say, hey, something's coming. We need to be prepared. We may need to, update and change some of our rules and be prepared for a huge influx. We need to think about how we want to manage that. Collaborating cross-functionally really means having those conversations. And the final point I will make, going back to scraping, is because web scraping can be so effective as both a fraud and anti-competitive measure, you really want to make sure you're not giving too much information away. A lot of information you do want to make available on the site, but then you have to block the bots from that mass scraping. And if there's information that you don't need to make available, don't, because it's going to get scraped. So what thoughts do you have in closing there, Benjamin?
So yeah, regarding the proactively account for bots when planning high traffic events, so that's something that we have set up at Datadom. So for our enterprise customer, we have a bot SOC team that is working around the clock, and we have created a process where our customers can inform us in advance when they have a hype sales or some specific events to make sure that first the detection might be tighter during this period, and on the other side that we will have cybersecurity specialists that will monitor actively the traffic to adjust the detection capability in real time to make sure that the hype sales will be mostly focused for humans rather than bots. So that's very interesting, and we could spend hours talking about all those topics. So thank you for for sharing that. So if you have any questions, you can add them into the list. We will start with a few questions to address that we have received. So first question is, how do I make sure that I don't turn away real customers when I'm blocking bots?
Yes, and this is a question I get a lot because, again, going back to that customer experience piece of this, yes, your customers are going to get frustrated if they can't do business with your site because they can't get the inventory they want or their accounts are taken over. They will get equally frustrated if when they try to do business on your site, they are uh, introduced to a lot of challenges and captchas that waste their time and they struggle to solve. I don't know about you, Benjamin, but you get those things where you have to, find the cars or find the crosswalks, and It's frustrating and it wastes time and you don't always get it right the first time. And most people don't like them and they don't like that additional friction. And even if a small percentage of your customer base leaves and abandons their transactions, that's still a significant portion of your revenue and a significant number of unhappy customers. So, really making sure that one, you are tuning your system and reducing your false positives so that you're not introducing friction and challenges to legitimate human customers. That's first. And then think about when you do have to challenge and collect additional proof that someone is human or versus a bot, think about how you do that. Think about the challenge mechanisms that might be lower friction, that might not frustrate your customers as much. You don't want to have to, do the equivalent of, walking on a bed of nails in order to prove that you're human, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's definitely what our customers are concerning about when they are activating the protection. So you're right. So there are two topics here. First, make sure that when there is user interaction required to protect the endpoint, so using a challenge, first it has to be as low as possible. So we mentioned 0.01% to make sure that it's very, very rare situation. And when this situation is coming, you have to make sure that the user experience won't be so bad, and definitely spending one, two, three, four different iteration on trying to pass a captcha is sometimes a disaster in terms of user experience. And at Datadom, we are working with different captcha providers, and today our recommendation is to use the smoother one, that is most of the time the slider, that doesn't require too much reflection on what you need to do, and there are zero doubt on the expectations on the user. You just have one bar to slide, and that's kind of no-brainer interaction from the user. So to make sure that those 0.01% situations are not so painful and you won't drop before buying your stuff in the cart, for instance.
One thing I'll mention as we talk about this, I mentioned earlier that there can be very sophisticated bots out there. Some of the most sophisticated ones are trying to solve CAPTCHAs and trying to solve some of these challenges. So, one thing we have to make sure of and be careful of is that we don't introduce challenges that are easier for bots to solve than they are for humans to solve.
Yeah, exactly. Specifically, everything around image recognition is an area where the machine learning is doing an amazing job. So being rely on those kind of challenges might be easier for bots than human. So this is the reason why that's not our first recommendation in terms of captcha. And actually the captcha page, it's more a way for us to collect more insight about the user rather than the challenge itself. It's just a way for us to have more signals to take a new decision and to authorize the user to keep the session on the website rather than being a showstopper for the humans.
Yeah.
Regarding the questions, we have another question around the machine learning. So how do you make sure your machine learning model stay up to date?
That's probably for you, right?
Yeah, I can take it. So this is a great question. So here, so I will talk a bit about statistics. We have two major metrics, the false positive and the false negative. So the false positive is what we've just talked, when we think the request is coming from a bot, but it's actually a human. So this is pretty easy to improve because we have a strong indicator that is the captcha passed rate. So there are tons of machine learning algorithm here that can improve automatically this rate by learning from it in real time. For the false negative, this is a more complex topic because by definition, if we didn't detect the attack, we kind of need one more request to take the decision to block it. And here we have data scientists that are working every day to analyze the past data with new detection mechanism to measure the percentage of a bot that could have been detected earlier in the process. On the other side, our threat research team is working with the different scraping communities to have new insight coming from the users and coming from the different technologies that are leveraged by the attackers and the bad bots. We are monitoring, for instance, all the bot as a service solution that Sandy you've just mentioned, and we are doing our online test to make sure that we are detecting every single solution that are used by the hackers and by the attackers. And this is how we can train our AI on the false negative rate. One more question. So one question is coming. Are there times I should be more permissive about which bot I allow or block?
There might be. It's going to depend a lot on your business. And it goes back to a little bit of, your tolerance for false positives, right? Obviously, you want as few as possible, but there may be times on your site where you decide, you know what, it's better to just allow everyone, or you really want to lock it down a bit. The other thing is you may decide that at certain times of day or year, you want to be more permissive or restrictive about good bots. We didn't really talk about good bots as much in this session, but not all bots are bad. Obviously, there are a lot of bad ones out there, but there are also a lot of crawler bots that are out there, you know, understanding, what's out there on the internet. They help improve your results in search engines. There's value in that. And often you may have collaborations with partners that use bots to get information they can then help to maybe resell your inventory, perhaps travel site aggregators, for example, and you have partnerships with those. So one thing you need to think about is, are there different times where perhaps because you're experiencing particularly heavy traffic where you want to throttle your good bots a little bit more, so that you can really prioritize your human customers? Or if there's a scenario of a particular type of, you know, high interest sale or something going on where maybe you want to block a little bit more to make sure that everyone who's coming in is human, or the reverse. Maybe you want to make sure that you allow everyone in for a good customer experience and you don't care if a couple of bots get through.
Yeah, so of course, yeah, Goodbot is one place where some of our customers are changing the balance. Sometimes, when depending on their infrastructure, some Goodbots might be sometimes quite intense in terms of volume and can impact also the availability of the website. So we have some customers that are rate limiting some Goodbots. It's rarely Googlebot, to be honest, because Google is very powerful. But on the kind of second level of search engines or a third-party monitoring solution, they might take the decision to rate limit the good bot. And regarding the bad bot, so the hype sales is definitely a very good example. We have a specific mode on Datadom that we are activating during hype sales to have a stronger detection, a bit more aggressive. One example that we've seen in this presentation is one sneaker website that is doing hype sales. Just to give you an idea, one number, the traffic can move from 1,000 requests per second up to 500,000 requests per second. So this is just huge, coming from all over the world. So in that situations, our customers are saying, please be quite strong. I need to protect my website and I need to reduce the volume of traffic that might reach my application. Let me look at the questions. I have one around. Yeah. So okay. So I guess we can wrap up because it's time. So really, thank you, Sandy. So that was an amazing discussion we had together.
Thank you,
So
Benjamin.
feel free to reach out to us on Twitter, LinkedIn, or by mail if you have any questions that we would like to deep dive, because we can spend hours on every of those slides. So that was very insightful, and happy to have a new webinar with you, Sandy.
Thanks very much for having me, Benjamin. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.